I love seeing the energy over at our visual facilitators wall. Now, he's told me that if he's missing anything, because we're all listening, to just let him know, and it will take life as we go along. And at the very end, it will be our gift from you, because we feel we're successful if we elevate the discussion. I love seeing the networking at lunch. And so as you think back to the design of the program, what we wanted to start with was, where are we? And how should we view our success or our failure after 30 years of supply chain management? And we talked about 9 out of 10 companies are stuck. And now what we're into is the part of the program where we can start to imagine, where we can start to think about how we use new thought to help us to move forward. And so the afternoon is full of some of these kind of content-rich ideas. We're going to start with a corporate social responsibility panel, and then we're going to follow with a healthcare panel where we're going to think about healthcare very differently. And then my friend Jeremiah Owang is going to come to the stage with me, and we're going to talk about social, the collaborative economy, and the evolution of social and customer sentiment and how we can use that outside in. And then we'll wrap up the day with a big data panel where we're going to think about new forms of analytics and how we can use that to really capture and use data that we can't use today in the enterprise. So corporate social responsibility. Our research says that 92% of companies have some public statement. Over 70% of companies actually tie that to the brand promise. But only 20% are actually holding themselves accountable for the end-to-end supply chain, and 65% of the resources in the supply chain are actually outside our 4 walls. We've been very fortunate to be able to partner with John Davies from GreenBiz. So John, if you come up. John and I used to work together at AMR Research, and John runs the research at GreenBiz, and he's got a great panel. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to you, and have a great time. Tell us all about CSR.
All right, thanks. Greetings, everyone. Why don't you come on up, Ashley and Bruno. So we've got a great panel for you today. A little bit different, a little outside the box, I guess, for some of the folks. But have a seat, Bruno. But I wanted to first start out to just, before any introductory remarks, just give you an idea of the companies who are up here. So I'm with GreenBiz Group. We are an environmental media company. We put on events. We have a website, www.greenbiz.com, and it's mainly focused on business-to-business, corporate social responsibility, environmental sustainability. And so I have here with me Ashley White from Kroger and Bruno Sarda from Dell. So Ashley, tell them, I'm sure they know what Kroger is, but give them a little bit of a sense of the company.
Yeah, hi, I'm with the Kroger company. We're the largest exclusive grocery retailer in the United States. Here locally, we're Fry's. We have 17 different banners. Where I'm from in Southern California, we're Ralph's and Food for Less. We have 2,500 stores in 31 different states throughout the United States, including in Alaska. We're a $94 billion company, so pretty large.
Great, okay. Bruno, Dell?
Sure. Well, hi, everyone. So Dell, you may know Dell mostly as a computer company, and we still do a lot of that. What people often don't know is actually the consumer side of Dell is actually less than 20% of the revenue. It's actually less than 5% of the income. We're primarily a B2B organization. Most of the search engines and social networks you use, every time you load a page, that page is probably being delivered by a Dell server out of some data center. We have grown in the last few years through mostly acquisition and some organic development into a full-blown kind of IT solutions company that's now over 30% of the revenue, and actually over 50% of the profit comes from non-hardware type of revenue. So probably a slightly different company than the household name that you know as Dell, but we're still very much in the business of making hardware all the way down from small devices to full-blown kind of data centers, kind of container style equipment, and pretty much everything in between.
Great. So, I'm glad that Laura said that we're sort of more of the future here when we talk about it. So our topic, corporate social responsibility, or another way to look at it, sustainability. It's an interesting topic and an interesting term because usually if people spend a lot of time trying to define it, they're a consultant, and if they're actually doing things, they're working on it, and they don't really care about how precisely they define this word of corporate social responsibility or sustainability. But I know many of you have probably read Laura's book, and I think the interesting aspect around sustainability is that it is one of these horizontal functions within a company. So, we saw CIOs come up in technology, and they build these huge empires to implement, software solutions and all of that. With sustainability, there's really no empire. These groups are relatively small when you talk about the people who have sustainability in their title, but they tend to look at how do I embed this across our organization? How do I get everyone in the company focused on taking a sustainable perspective? And so we thought today we'd bring together a couple of companies who are really doing a lot of fascinating things and talk a little bit about how they do it. So the first thing I wanted to get a perspective of, Ashley, where do you sit in the organization?
Yeah, so sustainability is just starting to become a core component to Kroger. There's quite a few people that have sustainability in their title when you look at each of the different divisions. But from corporate Kroger, there's actually only 3 of us that have sustainability in their title. There's our director of sustainability, and she oversees the entire program. There's myself, I sit in the supply chain side, so I'm actually in the logistics department. So my responsibility is the supply chain, the trucks, the transportation, the network, the distribution centers, things to that effect. And then we have another gentleman who's in corporate brands. We have a large manufacturing side of the company, so he's responsible for sustainability from that perspective. But that's it. We're really kind of at the foreground of this emerging and how we track sustainability throughout our company.
And Bruno, how about yourself?
Well, we've certainly evolved, and one of the things I find is as sustainability evolves in the company, the way it's organized tends to evolve also. So early on, when it was really about kind of compliance and risk management, it was legal, finance. It lived in HR for a while when there was a big focus on things like diversity and inclusion. But for the last few years now, because it's become such a core part of our brand and our go-to-market proposition and our culture, actually we roll up into the CMO, so the kind of part of the centralized brand strategy organization. And then we have similar, what we call kind of a hub and spoke model. So we have the corporate sustainability team, again, rolling up into the CMO. That, if you will, is the hub, kind of drives strategy, a lot of the goal setting, a lot of the measurement. But then engages, functional experts around the company from, logistics, supply chains, production, manufacturing, facilities, operations, you name it, because at the end of the day, there's an entire portfolio that has to be delivered against to meet the corporate level commitments.
Great. So what I want to start with, I don't know that I'll remember to do everything end to end, but sort of talk about different areas where supply chain touches. Because one of the things that we talk a lot about is that when you're leading sustainability, your real title ought to be Chief Translation Officer, because you're taking concepts that people aren't really familiar with and you're trying to put it into their language so that you can implement it and really have successes in that way. So in the area of supply, Bruno, I'm going to ask you this one first so you can get ready. In the area of supply, I know that in the electronics industry, an awful lot has been done in terms of working with suppliers, and that a lot of this has been driven by sustainability. So tell the folks, the work of EICC, Dell's part in that. I know you were one of the leaders in really getting the code of conduct and the supplier auditing going. So how does that work, and how is sustainability and supply chain sort of working together there?
Sure. I mean, as with many sectors, we work all with our competitors because we have such overlap in our supply chain that over time we realize we have a lot of common risks. We have a lot of common kind of operational potential derailers and things that are partly, tying back to things like brand reputation, brand risk, but also operational risk. And so the EICC is the Electronics Industry Citizenship Coalition. It's a sector alliance, if you will, to collaborate on, how to work in a consistent and systematic fashion with our supply chain to do two things primarily. One is to make sure that the bar is set at a high level across the board so that any given supplier can't say, oh, Dell's too harsh, I'll go work with this other company that may not care as much. But it's primarily to make it easier for actually our suppliers to comply, because there's one standard for auditing, there's one standard for reporting, there's one set of rules that we've all agreed to, and actually many of the members of the EICC are members of the supply chain and aren't just kind of the OEMs like we are. But it just makes a lot of sense for us to control kind of the cost aspect of managing our supply chain in a sustainable way. It makes sense for the suppliers so that, again, compliance is easier to understand. Again, there's a standard code and to comply against. But what we've seen, and maybe we'll get into that, is actually there's a strong correlation between how much a supplier embraces these concepts, including things like reporting, and how well they perform actually on their audits and overall their performance as a supplier. So it actually makes a lot of business sense to engage your supply chain on sustainability. It lowers your risk, it improves your efficiency, it does a lot of great things.
Well, let's stay on it. So you were one of the first to request from your suppliers, I think, the top 80% of spend or something like that?
We're at 95 now.
95% to participate in the Carbon Disclosure Project's supply chain survey. So I know that that's had an impact on supply. So how's that program worked and what's the impact been?
It's worked great. Actually, we keep getting asked by CDP to come talk to different things because the simple act, which is actually not part of the EICC code, but of requiring our suppliers, tier one suppliers, again, 95% of spend, to report their carbon disclosure or their greenhouse gas emissions to us, really led to a couple of things. One, it actually, in many cases, made them start doing it. And what you find systematically in sustainability is when you start kind of shining that spotlight in some of those corners that you may not have shown before, you always just gain. I mean, emissions primarily are generated from energy that's being consumed, and energy, as we know, has a cost. So as we're helping our suppliers manage their emissions down, they're actually achieving gains through energy savings. We've actually been so successful on the carbon side of disclosure with CDP. We started with water disclosures. Actually, this year is the first year, and actually I just heard a couple of days ago we've achieved the 100% response rate as well on the water, even though that was voluntary. We did not require it because it was the first year. But I think that's a testament to the fact that the suppliers have seen value in doing it on the carbon side, that even the voluntary participation in the water program, we saw also 100% participation.
So is it sort of iron fist, velvet glove, or did they come along willingly?
In sustainability overall, and I'm sure it's probably similar at Kroger, but you do almost everything that you do with virtually no authority. I mean, even when you say you require something, the fact is, if we've got, let's say, an Intel or a Microsoft or, Hitachi in our supply chain, it's not like we're going to say, okay, we're not buying your processors anymore. So, I mean, even though we can require it, it doesn't always carry as much weight as you would like it. So you really have to help them see the value. You have to help them see where they're going to benefit. You have to be collaborative in helping them achieve. So it can't just be, here, go do that and come back when you're done. So for example, we spent several years in a row, we set up workshops for suppliers. We flew CDP people out to Asia and other parts of the world to train suppliers who were interested. We systematically had 70, 80, 90, 100 suppliers showing up to these meetings. So again, it's a collaborative approach to to, our supply chain is vital to our success. We don't see it as a separate body that we just have to manage. It's a vital organ to our corporate success, so we really treat them like an extended part of the family.
Great. So one of the things you're seeing here is carbon as a proxy both for greenhouse gas emissions and also for energy efficiency. And so I spent 20 years, automating warehouses, and so my lens has always been about how do you wring more efficiency out of operations. And I think the thing with sustainability is that you can really find innovation when you start looking at your operations a little bit differently and with this lens of sustainability and in some cases carbon reduction. So Ashley, you have a really cool project going on in Southern California, and I won't spoil it, so I'll let you tell everyone one of the things Kroger is doing.
Sure. As of this June, we were able to finally unveil and do a ribbon cutting on what we call the Feed Project. It's where we take all the waste from the 359 Ralphs and Food for Less stores in Southern California. We backhaul all of the food that is far past expired, nothing that you would donate, nothing that's edible, that's no longer edible. And we bring it back to the distribution center and we put it through a process and into an anaerobic digester. It's the first of its kind. It's a 2 million gallon anaerobic digester. The interesting component of this digester is we actually can take plastics and other materials into it. A lot of the hurdles in getting this sort of technology put in place before was the labor required to open up salads that are in the plastic clamshell cases and getting the food out so that you could actually use that organic waste. So this digester is unique in that regard. The digester that's on campus actually even takes meat trimmings as well. And it's co-located with a dairy plant we have on site that makes ice cream. So when we switch from chocolate to strawberry and you have to change that stream, that comes out and gets put in. And the bugs love that. We love to say that the bugs love that. So we create this really yucky milkshake, and I like to say that it just sits and ferments, and the gas that comes off of that we use to actually power the boiler that they use at the creamery on site. So we probably have the cleanest ice cream around. But it also produces 20% of the electrical needs for the campus there in Compton. It's the first of its site. We're really excited with how it's turned out, and we're kind of looking forward into what does that mean moving forward. The really interesting component of that is all the additional benefits that we get out of it. And I always have to check my notes because I'm an engineer and I'm afraid I'll missay a number. But it offset 55,000 tons per year of food waste that was going into a landfill in the Central Coast. That's 150 tons per day. That, as I said, it's 20% of the energy that we consume on campus, and that reduced 500,000 miles of truck trips that would have taken that organic waste to the landfill. And for those of you interested, it produces about 3/4 of a megawatt. So it's really, really exciting, and it's opening new doors that we hadn't even considered.
So let's
Thank you.
look at that. But let's go further, and maybe I can say theoretically, there's something else you could be doing.
Sure. So Waste Management up in Northern California has a landfill there that they use to power natural gas trucks. So we're looking at what they've put into place, and could our anaerobic digester, in theory, be used in a similar way. There's also Fair Oaks Farms, which is a dairy that has an anaerobic digester, and they use that to power compressed natural gas trucks. We're evaluating for our fleet how natural gas trucks will work, and I'm happy to say that there's a project that we're presenting this month to our officers that will put 40 natural gas trucks in our Clackamas operation up in Portland, Oregon. But we would like to eventually, my grand scheme hopefully, is to be able to close the loop similar to the way those two companies have before us, is to close that loop, to become our own producer, to take that waste stream and use it as an opportunity as a fuel source, a renewable fuel source. The nice part, if you can actually close that loop, you become so renewable, you're actually reducing over 100% of your carbon. So what that waste used to go to the landfill, it's now being used in a way that it's not going to be producing that methane. So it's really interesting that we can actually hopefully get to a place where we're producing our own fuel from something that used to be a very dirty, very expensive, very costly material. So
See, I would applaud that. So I think that's really cool, and I think one of the things that we see with companies when they're using this lens of sustainability is you're looking at things differently, and you find all of these incredible opportunities. And so, sustainability isn't a cost, right? So it's not a cost of business. It should be an opportunity, and we believe it should drive higher margins, greater revenues. So Bruno, one of the things that Dell has done a lot, and some in the audience may be interested, is lots of innovative packaging, right? Mushrooms, bamboo. Talk a little bit about what Dell's doing with their packaging strategy.
Sure. Well, it's been an interesting journey. Many years ago, maybe around 2007 or so, Michael Dell, our CEO and founder, had made a public statement that he wanted Dell to, become the greenest IT company in the world, but never really defined that. Again, he didn't spend much time trying to define what does that mean, but rather encouraged everybody to figure out, so look at what you do and look at how you could do it better. And so that actually became the genesis for a lot of the programs we have in place today, from high up in the supply chain through down to things like logistics, packaging, et cetera. And so our packaging team has been on this really incredible journey of discovery, but also very kind of intelligent approach, talking to customers, especially. I mentioned we have some very large customers who get a lot of Dell product, and the fact is, if you're a big data center, if you're a big commercial operation, and you're literally unpacking dozens or hundreds of Dell products a day, and some of your offices may be in that case, you end up seeing a lot of Dell waste, right? A lot of boxes and styrofoam and all, cushioning of all sorts, and you never really want your brand to be trash. And then we heard from customers, and especially in some countries, that are actually paying disposal fees, for some types of packaging. So that really started us on a thinking of how can we deliver better value while also achieving more environmental outcomes. And so again, deconstructed really what makes up really packaging, and developed the strategy that we call the 3 C's. It's the C's of content, cube, and curb. And what that is the content. So it's really what we make packaging from. And so from things like cardboard, but also a lot of plastics, especially in the cushioning and what's inside the box. Not the computer, but what's between the cardboard and the computer. Innovated with things like bamboo. Bamboo actually is a remarkable fiber that is not only very rapidly renewable, can grow up to 1 inch an hour. We now grow actually a lot of bamboo very close to our production facilities in Asia, so there's not a whole lot of transport involved with that. It's at least 1,000 miles away from panda habitats. We often get that question. We're not competing with pandas for food. It's air dried, so there's actually it's a very low energy process. But actually, bamboo, aside from being a rapidly renewable resource, being fully actually a compostable resource, also has remarkable strength and qualities, and so much so that actually this other part that we call the cube has been to reduce, if you will, the actual footprint of the package in relation to the product. Because obviously the products, especially laptops, have been getting smaller and smaller. So it's not just that the box is smaller because the products are smaller, but actually cushioning made from bamboo doesn't have to be as big as cushioning made from some plastics, for example. And so that's been a fantastic story, and actually, again, really invited from customers when we started piloting it. I mean, customers just could not get enough of it. We started with 1 line of laptops, and they quickly demanded that we go further. Bamboo doesn't lend itself well to heavier products, so then we started looking at how do you do heavier products like servers, storage, et cetera, and that's where mushrooms came in. And by the way, all of this is always collaborating with our suppliers. Actually, we have a local supplier here, UGS Unisource, just down in Chandler, that has their R&D center, and that's been hand-in-hand partner in helping us develop some, for example, the bamboo packaging. Another vendor, Ecovative, actually developed a way to use basically the biological agent that makes mushrooms happen, mycelium, and use agricultural waste products, things like wheat chaff, corn husks, coconut husks, etc., and to mold that into 100% actually compostable, biodegradable, actually technically edible packaging. There's a YouTube video out there if you want. Some of our packaging folks are actually eating the packaging. But it's remarkable, and it's also the packaging. Actually, this product we make out of mushroom actually has Class 1 firewall properties. It's actually extremely water resistant. So it has actually very good cushioning properties. And all along, by the way, we've delivered a better content. The cube. The curb part is the curbside recyclability. It's great to make a recyclable material, but it's useless if it's not widely recycled. So the curbside recyclability was a goal of, we want to use materials that literally your local waste hauler can just take, and you don't have to go find, hopefully there's nobody from Tetra Pak in the room, but you see, I hate to see that on my milk cartons. It's like, oh, some facilities can recycle this, and then like go find them. All along, we've just on the bamboo packaging, for example, have achieved over $20 million in savings on our packaging costs. So to your point, it's not that this stuff actually costs us more, it's that by really looking at it differently, we managed to achieve, great results and save quite a bit of money in the process.
Great. So now I'm going to switch over, and in a few minutes I'm going to see if anybody has any questions, because we've got these great folks up here, and that we could talk for hours about all the different types of things that they do. So we want to be able to answer what you're interested in. But Ashley, another big area is always in operations and facilities, and all the types of improvements that can happen in there. So what's Kroger been doing in terms of saving energy, that sort of thing?
Sure. So as I stated, there's only 3 of us that actually have sustainability in their title, and that's not to discredit that almost everyone in our company does some sort of sustainability project from the corner of their desk. We're just getting to be more integrated. We're trying to find ways to actually focus on that and be more holistic in an approach. But it all starting, I think, for many people that have embarked on the sustainability journey. I think it starts by looking up and you look at the lights and go, well, we should probably look into those new light bulbs that you have. And so we did that, and we embarked on that however many years ago, and that kind of kicked it off. The ROI on that was huge, and it really kind of opened our company's eyes to what we hadn't considered on ways to reduce our overhead and our cost. We operate on very small margins. We make about 3 cents on every dollar, so everything that we can save is really important to us, as to many companies. But from there, we looked at some really unsexy projects like variable speed drives on refrigeration units, and that doesn't get a whole lot of airtime, but that was probably our most successful project to date, to be completely honest. And I don't know for any of you, my mom always used to yell at me to close the door when you have the air conditioning on, because you just shouldn't leave the door open. But we have that problem as a distribution center. We have these dock doors where we have to, put the goods on the truck, and literally you're sitting there in a warehouse with the doors open, the refrigeration on. So looking at insulated doors and automatic doors that close when there's not a truck in there, and so that somebody doesn't forget to close the door. These little things that you don't realize have huge impacts. Another one is an energy project that we go through, and we did energy audits at all of our different distribution and manufacturing centers. We came up with a list of all the items that we needed to optimize in order to really reduce our energy consumption. And we go through and we reevaluate that list every year, and we've just started ticking away at it. So we have some pretty serious goals associated with that, and I'm happy to report that we're well on our way and have succeeded what we originally thought. Some of the other things are water usage. We had a really great black belt project around the wastewater that we had and how much water and chemical content we were basically wasting. We didn't need that much, but it's because nobody had really monitored the flow and the content of it. So one of our industrial engineers took it on as a black belt project, took the initiative, found that it had a great ROI, and our water usage, the goal target was 10%. We're now down 18% in water consumption. So it's these little ideas that come across someone's desk, hey, let's look into this, that have really been extremely powerful. We have hydrogen fuel cell forklifts, where we've changed out electric forklifts. That's been pretty compelling. The interesting part about that is you could get in a debate on hydrogen versus electric, and it kind of comes back to we're getting smarter about this. Some areas it makes more sense to use electric. If you're on hydroelectric power in Oregon, probably makes sense to stay there. If you're on coal in Southern California, you should probably consider an alternative. So really kind of looking beyond our energy consumption on how it impacts has helped us drive these decisions in a better way. We're looking at solar. We have 40 stores that have solar panels. We have one distribution center. We had this approach where we would do one-off projects quite often. Oh, let's go try solar here and let's see if it works. And then you go, oh, okay, well that was great. Let's go do another one. And it was interesting. The solar power was really eye-opening. We figured out we were doing all these very piecemeal, and instead we weren't leveraging our buying power. So instead we stopped. We put the kibosh on solar projects, and we went out with a mass procurement that said, hey, we want 20 megawatts. We don't want, a couple here and a couple there. And so we went out with this big procurement that just closed. So we're waiting to hear who was selected. And from there, we'd like to see a mass rollout wherever it's possible, have solar put in place. But looking at those areas where you find that a project makes sense for you, and then you take a second and breathe and figure out how you can implement it across the entire network. And then obviously the feed project, and now looking at alternative fuels in our transportation fleet has been kind of the pie in the sky, but it's really emerging, and it's nice to see that these sort of things seem crazy on the onset. What was the guy said? Funny part with the bad part about crazy is crazy looks crazy in the beginning, but so does really successful projects like feed.
Right.
So you never know in the onset if the idea will work out or not, but you sometimes have to be willing to take the risk. But we've done a lot of things. I think the most important part for Kroger right now is we're starting to find that instead of having people do this from the corner of their desk, we're taking a step back. We're putting people with sustainability in their title in the organization, so we actually have the hub and spoke type of approach where you have somebody that's a leader in that role that you can bring this project to that will help you get it seen through to fruition, so we can expedite that process and really make a difference moving forward. The bottom line is these projects have been so great. They have great ROI. They're better for business. They help us to remain more competitive. It's not doing business differently. It's just putting a different title on it, quite frankly. I mean, you sit and you look at reducing your miles per gallon every single day in logistics. How can I drive that truck less miles and use less fuel? That's not anything different than any of us don't do on a daily basis. It's just thinking about what are the other benefits we're getting by looking at that.
Yeah, the problem with crazy ideas is sometimes you are crazy. So that was the quote actually I was trying to remember. But earlier today we heard a really important topic around talent management and recruiting. And I think one of the things we see, especially with millennials, but interestingly enough, a lot with boomers as well, is that they really embrace this idea of sustainability. And so there's a whole talent attraction and retention category of using sustainability to drive that. So, I'd like both of you, and I'll start with Bruno, share, how does that fit in at Dell? The whole sustainability. I know everyone says first we have to get rid of the styrofoam coffee cups, right? Or, but really, how do you engage with employees, and how do you view that as something that's really helping Dell become a better company?
Sure. Well, in fact, I think, I believe it was Net Impact who was able to measure that actually some of the biggest readers of corporate responsibility reports out there are your prospective employees, and actually a lot of your existing employees. I mean, when we do kind of audience definition around our reporting, our employee base is a big part, and this notion of employee engagement is very important in terms of harnessing the resources of the organization, but also to make sure they understand everything that's happening, because there are, again, just lots and lots of benefits to that. So for us, it's a little bit the same. It's making sure that it's core to our values, it's part of what we do, but it's also a chance for everybody to again look at where they are in the organization, what part of their job can be done in a different way, a better way, whether it's engaging with suppliers as global commodity managers, it's the people who source paper or raw material, but also those who design our products, the people who run our operations, the people who who engage with our customers. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that in most non kind of industrial type of buildings, about a third of the power consumption in a building is IT. And certainly if you look at data centers and things like that, I mean, these are about, nowadays, about 1.5 to 2% of the world's electricity is going into data centers. So actually looking at, are you optimizing the way you leverage energy going into your IT, because it's costing you a lot of money. And what we find is most organizations have different people buying energy, using energy, and paying for energy, and they're usually not talking to each other. So it's a lot of that. It's just a lot of empowerment throughout the organization. Then we create opportunities through, they used to be called green teams. We've now formalized that as a formal employee resource groups around the world. We have a goal of having about 10% of our employees engaged. We have about 110,000 employees. We're not quite there yet, but we're close. At a local level, because actually what people really love, I mean, it's great to think about things like, climate change and all of that, but what people really want is, when they see their neighborhoods turn yellow and they used to be green, or when, they used to have ponds and now they don't, or when they used to be river flowing under the bridge and now there isn't. That's what really motivates individuals to go do something, is when it actually can tie back to their community. So empowering local teams to act on some local component that ties back to their community, that has business impact, and that's motivating for them is a winning combination usually.
Ashley, how about for Kroger?
Yeah, I would say for us, it's very much a lot of the same. I think that, at the end of the day, we all want to go home and hope that we've done something good with our day. And I think that Kroger is finally starting to understand that if we give our employees the right tools, that they will willingly do so. And it's just about getting them the right information and the right tools and how they can help from internal to the company. We have a workforce of 350,000 people at Kroger. That is a powerful number of people. If even a part of them are interested in doing something sustainable while at work, getting rid of a styrofoam cup throughout the day, that's a huge number of people to make a shift. And if you give people the opportunity to do something and feel rewarded and feel at the end of the day they've done a good job, not just in the work that they've done, but do something good for the environment, that's a great recruiting tool. You now have people speaking on your behalf in large numbers in a way that you cannot do as, even just HR or marketing or management. Allowing them to get the word out for you is our single largest resource.
So we've managed to cover a lot of topics, and we still haven't hit conflict minerals, the whole concept of risk and sustainability, and why risk management is becoming a key aspect of this. We haven't talked about life cycle assessments of products and all that. But I'd like to take the last several minutes here and see if there are any questions in the audience. Supposedly there's like some Twitter questions, or anybody else have a question here? I think we have some microphones going around. Here's somebody.
I can probably speak loudly enough, but for both your companies, what was the trigger to actually start sustainability in your companies? I mean, when I think of things like green initiatives, I think, well, that's a great buzzword, let's all be green. But I mean, what actually triggered it? Was it a groundswell, or was it one individual? How did it happen?
For us, there was a very clear defining moment when one of our project managers presented a lighting project. It was literally just changing out the lights at a distribution center, and the ROI was 30%. And I don't think the officers had seen an ROI so high before. And the response was, whoa, what else are we missing? And we want more of these, and bring us as many of these as you can, and we will go after all of them. So I think that was really a huge shift for us. I don't think we realized how much we were overlooking at that point.
And I know for one of your big competitors, it was the same conversation at the board, like, how could you have missed all this? And and that was really a driving focus.
In our case, it's been, I would say a steady curve, and then, with some inflection points. I mean, when Michael Dell started Dell, his idea was, surely there's a better way to do IT. So this idea of very efficient, just-in-time a kind of built to order of IT, from the start actually had kind of sustainability in it. It wasn't for the benefit of the environment, but it was really, how do we eliminate all the waste and efficiencies in the, how we bring technology to market so that we can, increase the speed to market while reducing cost. And then all along the way, this value of, how do we systematically chase out inefficiency. Back in the early 90s, we were collaborating with the government on the development of Energy Star standards. Designing for recyclability was an early principle because actually it makes a lot of sense in your spare parts and kind of break fix type of business also. If you design it to be disassembled easily for recycling, it actually also makes it easier to repair. But then, every once in a while, we've had a big inflection point. I mentioned earlier, Michael said a few years ago, he really wanted Dell to be the greenest IT company in the world, and Dell has a competitive culture. Our kind of internal motto of sorts is, win with integrity. But it's the integrity, but it's also the win part. So, and then every once in a while, for example, customers specifically around designing better energy efficiency into the product. Every so often, there's enough kind of critical mass around like, wow, we're hearing a lot of that. What are we doing about it? So it's been both kind of a steady path as well as inflection points every so often.
Great. So we have another question over here. Let's see. Come on, you're not that shy.
Ashley, Jim Harger with Clean Energy. I've talked to you extensively, but let's focus on economics because I think you have a very strong story. They didn't get out. Without subsidies, you're cheaper than diesel to do all the things you just talked about with the new fuel?
Yeah, so in our evaluation for LNG, one of the things we're not allowed to take credit for in our model is grants or subsidies. There's such an uncertainty with subsidies, when they'll come out, whether you can get them or not. So in evaluating LNG in our trucking fleet, we actually left that part out. And we are still highly competitive, well above the threshold that we would put for, so the ROI right now is still being vetted, or else I would just present a number. But we're definitely competitive enough by switching to natural gas that it makes sense, and we're not using subsidies to do so. So yeah, natural gas is definitely something that we're happy to see. I think the real shift for us in natural gas has been a new emergence in the technology. For us, there was an issue with the size of engine that was available. It was a much smaller engine, and there were some issues. We haul 80,000 loads, very heavy, and it just wasn't the right size for our fleet, and it wasn't the right time. So now there has been a new engine that's available. It's completely consistent with our fleet spec now. Standing outside the truck that we're presenting looks exactly the same as the truck that we have currently in our fleet that's a diesel. It's no different to the driver, except for it's quieter, cleaner. It's a little bit nicer, a little bit newer. But that's a huge shift for us to not really have to change too much. I'm not asking for a whole lot. I'm asking for you to put the same truck out there with a comparable engine, and we're going to save money in doing so. So I think that's been a real interesting shift in the natural gas market, at least for us.
So that's kind of amazing, right? Because they're going to get a much better experience, and you're going to save a ton of money. And I think that's a lot of these stories. Do we have one last question, or I'll ask one? Okay, so in this journey, and that's really what it is, because this is going to continue going on as long as your CFO sees returns and you keep driving business. So what do you share with the supply chain audience? I mean, how should they move forward from this conversation?
So I would just challenge all of us in the room. I think that there's not a thing we do in supply chain that isn't already focused on sustainability metrics. We just haven't thought of it in that regard. Miles per gallon and reducing, empty miles and things to that effect are all something that we focus on very much. I think a lot of what we do is already sustainable, and it's really about pushing yourself to the next level. What else could we be doing? What have we overlooked? Did we not look up and look at the lights? So just finding those little things that you could be doing your job that much better if you consider it a sustainability component. And also tracking the sustainability metrics that you're already doing without knowing. I think that's a huge opportunity.
Bruno?
Yeah, I think my message would be also to just kind of challenge yourself and your organization to think kind of beyond compliance. And what we've seen systematically when we've challenged ourselves to just go beyond what was required of us, we've been rewarded a lot in our business. In fact, nowadays, over 70% of the RFPs and our large RFPs we respond to have specific elements around sustainability. We often get told that, because ultimately we sell something that's more and more commoditized, that we often get told now that the reason we won the business is because of all the things we're doing on top of the core product, right? Whether it's IT, hardware, software solutions, cloud delivery, et cetera. And same in our supply chain. The fact is our suppliers who have taken the step to kind of make some investments, make some cultural shifts, and take risks. Sometimes you don't know exactly what's going to pay off or how fast. But I would say those suppliers of ours, whether in packaging, whether in manufacturing, whether in transport or logistics, or even all the reverse supply chain providers we have, those who have kind of stepped up and made changes, I think, have been rewarded with more business from us, with more business from others. That's helped them attract, and that it is truly a differentiator, and it is a business driver, and you just have sometimes to make that leap of faith, because the way you've optimized your what you do now, it feels comfortable, and it's uncomfortable, and it's hard to kind of break those things that are so well oiled. No pun intended, but kind of, and just to make that leap.
Great. So, wait, one last question. Do I have time, Laura? Yeah. Okay.
Very quickly, it struck me when you were doing the summary that you've been talking about infrastructure changes, packaging, warehousing, things like that. But what about operational changes? And I know you talked about still trying to focus on reducing the number of miles traveled. But when does a decision get made on satisfying one demand over another because this demand is going to be more green, as it were?
So we're actually suffering through that as we speak. With the natural gas project, one of the things we're considering is a renewable natural gas. It may not be as cost effective as going to conventional natural gas, but there are inherent benefits over renewable versus the conventional natural gas that can't be overlooked. Are they close enough? Can we get close enough that we can present both and allow our officers to see the unseen benefits, the ones that you can't put in an ROI, and will that be enough to help push them to make a decision? So we're very much on that right now. I think a lot of the low-hanging fruit has already been gobbled up, and so what does that mean to our company? And I think for us, it's the customer first. What does the customer want from us? What is going to make them want to come to our store versus another store? And how do we remain competitive in doing so? I don't think we're leaving anything on the table, and I think we gain something that's invaluable by considering those sort of alternatives. And I think it's really having an open dialogue with your senior management so that they can understand those things that you can't put in the ROI, that you have to have a conversation about first. It's really opening up the door and having a sit-down conversation about it.
It's a great question. If I can just add, I think exactly that. You don't always have to change the infrastructure. You could look at your existing infrastructure in different ways to use it. We're actually going through right now a relatively big shift in the whole both kind of demand cycle management and actually customer order cycle management to dramatically increase the amount of sea shipments we do versus air shipments of our products. And that actually has very big operational implications. We're not changing anything, we're not building new planes or new boats. We're just, but there's lots of moving parts there. Other things like, one of our goals was to significantly reduce employee commute days, and looking at, so how do you make that happen? And what are the kinds of changes you make to your hoteling space, as well as your telecommuting infrastructure and your virtual private networks, and all those things that make it so that if you're asking, okay, now we want 30-40% of our employees to not come to the office once or twice a week, how do you make that happen so that the employee experience remains and the productivity is as high or better? So again, these are operational changes, sometimes have infrastructural implications, sometimes not, but definitely consider those. That's a great point.
Awesome. Let's give them a hand.
All right. Thanks, Laura.